Hello, and thank you for joining us on Modern Living with Dr. Angela. I'm your host, Dr. Angela Chester. Today is day 5, our final day of looking at abusive behaviors. And today we will be discussing physical abuse. Now, I know that this may be a touchy subject for some, so if you feel that you should take a little one into another room, or perhaps you want to kind of remove yourself and go into a private room so that you can listen better, now is the perfect time to do that. We want for everyone to be comfortable while they learn. We also want you to remember that you can always call in and comment, voice your concerns, ask your questions, or simply take us with you. The number here, if you wish to call in, or take us with you if you need to run errands, you can listen via live broadcast if you dial 347-637-3288, 347-637-3288. We hope that you will be able to join us for our 30-minute broadcast today. So let's get started. Physical abuse is when someone deliberately hurts or injures you. It's an intentional and unwanted contact with you or something close to your body. Sometimes abusive behaviors do not cause pain or even leave a bruise, but it's still unhealthy. Examples of physical abuse include scratching, punching, biting, strangling, or kicking, throwing something at you, such as a phone, a book, a shoe, or a plate, pulling your hair, pushing or pulling you, grabbing your clothing, using a gun, a knife, a box cutter, a bat, mace, pepper spray, or any other weapon against you, forcing you to have sex or perform a sexual act, grabbing your face to make you look at, grabbing you to prevent you from leaving, or forcing you to go somewhere else. When the person slaps you, they punch you, they kick you, or they pinch you. They burn you, they bite you, they tie you up, they force you to share needles with others. They destroy your property or your possessions. They drive recklessly to frighten you. They disregard your needs when you are ill, injured, or pregnant. They abuse you while you are pregnant. They force you to abort or carry a pregnancy, or they physically restrain you. Domestic abuse is also called spousal abuse. This occurs when one person is in an intimate relationship or marriage and tries to dominate and control the other person. Domestic abuse that includes physical violence is also called domestic violence. Well, because today's show is rather long, we're going to take very small breaks. So we hope that after we take this very small break, you will join us for our final day in looking at abusive behaviors. Today we're discussing physical abuse. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Modern Living with Dr. Angela. I'm your host, Dr. Angela Chester. Day 5 is dealing with physical abuse. So what are some facts and statistics on physical abuse? It is alarming, quite alarming, about who's being physically abused as well as how severely people are being physically abused. The picture painted by statistics on physical abuse shows that this is a national epidemic, and the implications go all the way to the birth of children born to battered mothers through the end of life considered elder abuse. Nearly 5.3 million incidences of domestic violence occur annually among U.S. women aged 18 years and older, with 3.2 million occurring amongst men. Battered women average 6.9 physical assaults by the same partner in any given year. Battered men average 4.4 assaults by the same partner in any given year. Yes, you heard me correctly. Men and women alike experience physical abuse. This is not something that only affects women. There are women who are abusing their men. When people talk about domestic violence, they are often referring to the physical abuse of a spouse or an intimate partner. Physical abuse is the use of physical force against someone in a way that injures or endangers that person. Physical assault or battering is a crime, whether it occurs inside or outside of the family. The police have the power and the authority to protect you from physical abuse. Sexual abuse is a form of physical abuse. Any situation in which you are forced to participate in unwanted, unsafe, or degrading sexual activity is sexual abuse. Forced sex, even by a spouse or intimate partner with whom you also have consensual sex, is an act of aggression and violence. Furthermore, people whose partners abuse them physically and sexually are at a higher risk of being seriously injured and or killed. Physical abuse can make you feel anxious or fearful, lonely and isolated, depressed and sad, worthless. You have low self-esteem. It makes you want to harm yourself and even possibly run away. You feel that you are unable to concentrate at school, at work, to eat, or even sleep properly. Now, anyone can be physically abusive. This would include your mother, your father, sometimes both, a brother, a sister, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a husband, a wife, and any other adult or young person. Bullying is also a form of physical. When we think of physical abuse, we tend to think that it only happens in adults or someone who is old enough to possibly defend him or herself. However, physical abuse does occur in young children and sometimes even infants. Skeletal injuries in children that are younger than 2 years old may not be obvious. Therefore, a skeletal survey screening is recommended. Many fracture types can be accidentally inflicted. We understand. However, there are some warning signs. Fractures that raise a high degree of suspicion for inflicted injuries include any fracture in a non-ambulatory infant, multiple bilateral aged rib fractures, multiple and complex skull fractures, and scapular or shoulder-related fractures. Now, burn patterns that may suggest physical maltreatment would include, and remember, we're still speaking about children that are younger than 2 years old, patterned contact burns in clear shapes of hot objects. For example, it looks like the child has been burned with a fork, with a curling iron, or cigarette lighter. They have splash or spill burn patterns, as if something has been thrown and or dripped on them. Cigarette burns, localized burns to the genitalia or their buttocks. This is especially true during potty training. Evidence for excessive delay in seeking treatment. This would be an injury that has started to heal, but it's healing in any shape of deformity, or you notice that it's still extremely sensitive or irritated when it should have healed way sooner than what is being shown. We have to remember that our little ones cannot speak for themselves, and that their cries are sometimes cries of pain, not just of discomfort from having a wet diaper. Please be attentive to any little one that you notice happens to not be able to articulate themselves, but you notice they are whining or whimpering more often than you believe that they should. Well, we're going to take a very short break here, and when we return, we will continue looking at abusive behaviors, that of physical abuse. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Modern Living with Dr. Angela. I'm your host, Dr. Angela Tester. Today we are looking at physical abuse. Now, this is sometimes referred to as domestic violence or even domestic abuse. Well, you may be asking, well, what are the signs of physical abuse in seniors? Sometimes our seniors are in the same category as our little ones. They're not able to articulate what's going on, especially if they're living in any type of assisted living type facility, or the children of this elderly person do not live locally and they're not able to check on them on a regular basis. We should keep an eye out for, and especially in seniors, this applies to any and everyone, but especially seniors, bruises, black eyes, welts, lacerations, rope marks, broken bones, open wounds such as cuts, uninjured injuries in various stages of healing, broken eyeglasses or frames, or any physical sign of being punished or restrained. Laboratory findings that either indicate an overdose or an underdose of medication. Yes, you want to ask for what other laboratory finding anytime they have to go for any type of lab. Individual reports of being hit, slapped, kicked, or mistreated in any way. Vulnerable adults, sudden change in behavior. If your loved one all of a sudden becomes irritable, grouchy, they're just beside themselves, they're there, or they become very despondent, make note of that behavior. And or the caregiver's refusal to allow visitors to see that vulnerable senior adult. What does that mean? You want to make an impromptu visit to the nursing home, the convalescent center, or the assisted living facility, and they say, oh, no, you can't see them today. Why not? Should be your question. And we can understand if they delay and say they are doing A, B, or C, and you can come in an hour, in 2 hours, that may be reasonable, but a flat-out refusal be accepted, and you should definitely be alarmed. So what is the cycle of violence in domestic abuse? Domestic abuse falls into a common pattern, and there is a cycle. The cycle will look a little something like this. I want you to think of 6 boxes, and we're going to start at the position of 12 noon, and we're going to work clockwise. So I want you to think of abuse, guilt, excuse, normal behavior, fantasy, setup. Abuse, guilt, excuse, normal behavior, fantasy, setup. Each one of those things flowing into the other. So let's start with abuse. Your abusive partner lashes out at you with aggressive, belittling, or violent behaviors. The abuse is a power play. It's designed to show you who's in charge. Now, having this attitude of being in charge or showing you who's boss, if you've been listening to all of the other shows, you notice that is a trend. That is a sign, an attribute, a trait of people that are abusers. The next cycle is guilt. After abusing you, your partner feels guilty, but not over what he or she has actually done, but more worried about the possibility of being caught and facing a consequence for their abusive behavior. That's right. They're not guilty about what they've done to you. They're worried that they're going to be caught, which leads to the excuses. Your abuser rationalizes what he or she has done. The person may come up with a string of excuses, or yet they will blame you for the abusive behavior. Absolutely, positively, anything to avoid taking responsibility. This now goes into normal behavior. The abuser does everything that he or she can to regain control and to keep the victim in the relationship. Yes, they want you in the relationship. He or she may act as if nothing has ever happened, and he or she may turn on the charm. This peaceful honeymoon phase may give the victim hope that the abuser has really changed this time. But that, too, will repeat itself. So let's stay within the cycle. Fantasy and planning. Your abuser begins to fantasize about what abusing you again. He or she spends a lot of time thinking about what you've done wrong and how they'll make you pay. This person then makes a plan for turning the fantasy of abuse into reality. And what is the final step of this cycle? The setup. Your abuser sets you up and puts his or her plan in motion, creating a situation whereby they can justify abusing you. So if we look at the pattern again, and think of it as a clockwise motion, starting at 12 o'clock, there's abuse, guilt, excuses, normal behavior, the fantasy or the planning, and then the setup. And then that setup goes right back into, you guessed it, abuse. So you may be thinking, what am I going to do? I don't really know what to do. Well, your abuser will apologize, and they will have loving gestures in between the episodes of abuse, and that can make it quite difficult for you to leave. He or she may make you believe that you are the only person who can help them, and that things will be different this time, and that they truly, truly love you. However, there are dangers in staying in this relationship, and the danger for your life is extremely real. What you need to focus on is escaping this physical abuse. Start by learning that you are not alone. More than 10 any given month have already experienced some form of physical aggression from their dating partner. And many of these teens believe that there's nothing that they could do about it. Now, if these are teens, imagine how many adults also feel that they are trapped in these relationships. I want you to know that this behavior is wrong. Physical abuse is wrong. You need to talk to an adult, another family member, but most importantly, you need to talk to a local professional. They will instruct you on how to create a safety plan. You should also consider getting a restraining order. Now, this may cause more physical harm. This could cause you to be placed in a life-threatening situation. So before you just run out and get a restraining order, you have to consider the pros and cons, and please discuss it with a professional as to whether or not this is something that would be wise. But it is available to you. Do not accept or make excuses for your partner's abusive behaviors any longer. And remember that physical abuse is not your fault. You are the one being abused. It's not your fault when the other person is lashing out and causing you physical harm if it is not your fault. Now, again, physical abuse is not you guys are disagreeing and you decide that you're going to fight it out. That's a little different. This is unwanted, unwarranted abuse against your person. Well, we're going to take another short break, and when we return, we'll find out what does Scripture have to say about physical abuse. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Modern Living with Dr. Angela. I'm your host, Dr. Angela Tester. Today's episode is dealing with physical abuse in our week-long series of looking at abusive behaviors. We have discussed emotional abuse, financial abuse, sexual abuse, using one's children against them, also called parental alienation, and today is physical abuse. So what does Scripture have to say about physical abuse? Is there any redemption for someone who is being abused or is being the abuser? And, of course, we know that Scripture always points us in the right direction. We are reading from the ESV version today. You will know the one scripture that I have pulled that has a more traditional sound, and it will be from the King James Version. So we're looking at 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 8. 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 8. But understand this, that in the last days there will come times of difficulty for people who will be lovers of self, lovers of money, proud, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, heartless, unappeasable, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not loving good, treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having the appearance of godliness but denying its power. Avoid such people. Again, 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 8. But understand this, that in the last days there will come times of difficulty, for people will be lovers of self, lovers of money, proud, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, heartless, unappeasable, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not loving good, treacherous, reckless, swollen with lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having the appearance of godliness but denying its power. We want to avoid such people. We'll now look at Proverbs chapter 26, verse 21 through 28. Proverbs chapter 26, verses 21 through 28. As charcoal to hot embers and wood to fire, so is a quarrelsome man for kindling strife. The words of a whisperer are like delicious morsels. They go down into the inner parts of the body. Like the glaze covering an earthen vessel are fervent lips with an evil heart. Whoever hates disguises himself with his lips and harbors deceit in his heart. When he speaks graciously, believe him not, for there are 7 abominations in his heart. We'll look at 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 7. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 4 through 7. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Exodus chapter 21, verses 22 through 25. When men strive together and hit a pregnant woman, so that her children come out, but there is no harm, the one who hits her shall surely be fined, as the woman's husband shall impose on him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. But if there is harm, then you shall pay life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. Matthew 11:28. Matthew 11:28. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 14. Be ye not unequally yoked together with unbelievers, for what fellowship hath righteousness with unrighteousness, and what communion hath light with dark? Or verse 18 through 19. Luke 4:18 through 19. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. I want to thank you for joining us for another episode of Modern Living with Dr. Angela. I am host, Dr. Angela Tester. If you believe that you are in need of professional care, we would love to assist you. We are New Life Pastoral Counseling. Our website is www.newlifepastoralcounseling.com. If you would like to call us here at the office, the number is 562-209-2083. The number again, 562-209-2083. And as usual, thank you for listening. May you have a wonderful day and be blessed in the Lord. Bye-bye.